Joining us today, we've got Preferred by Nature. We've got the team of David, Rosie, Carmen, and Tim, who are going to help out, support us with overall understanding of updates, FAQs, country benchmarking throughout our conversation, but also present their the due diligence toolkit later on. So the kind of running order of events is we're going to start with a review of the key updates and latest FAQs and guidance. Moving on to the latest country benchmarking announcement and what that means and what our thoughts are. General Q&A, any issues, challenges you've been having, questions that have been raised from members of here, because there are non-TDUK members who have joined in this, so it's an open space for communication and collaboration. Then we'll be getting to EUDR support and Preferred by Nature's toolkit there on due diligence. And then Laura, to finish up, is going to give a quick update on some TDUK events for everybody involved here, just to close off there. So if that sounds okay, then I think we'll move on to the first item. Stuart. Do you have a question, Stuart, or I think you might just be unmuted? I'll pop him on mute.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
So just starting off then with our latest FAQs and guidance updates. So Zhao, do you want to lead us into that one?
Oh, shall we just invite David to start? Maybe David and Rosie, you may wish to introduce yourself a bit more.
Oh, yes.
And your other two colleagues, Carmen and yes, the other colleagues, please. Thank you.
That's right. I can just share my screen, which I will do now. And first, just find this. So we have a slide where we'll present ourselves. Can you see my screen?
I've just received.
Yes. Yes, David, we can see.
Super. Well, let me begin. So firstly, just to say we're very excited to join the May EUDR working group of Timber Development UK. We understand that these are good opportunities to provide updates, to share experiences and with members, and that's always very interesting for us. So thanks to Xiao and Joe and the Responsible Sourcing Committee for giving us this time. So on the agenda today, as Joe and Xiao have mentioned, there are kind of two big topics which are fairly recent in the calendar of 2025, and the steady pace towards the EUDR coming into application. It's the updated FAQ and guidance from last month, and the publication of the country benchmarks, which is very interesting because, Xiao, that was literally the day after you and I had a conversation last week, and we were talking about them. So, and then from Rosie, a little bit about how Preferred by Nature supports companies. So we're kind of calculating roughly, we haven't really timed it, but something in the order of maybe 15, 20 minutes and then 10 minutes of questions or discussion across like the hour and a half, if that sort of fits. And firstly, just to say that our team is a little bit bigger today than maybe in other occasions. So Rosie and myself will lead on the presentations, but we have my colleagues Tim and Carmen who will support with questions. So I'm going to be rude and introduce myself first, and then I'll give the floor just to say a couple of words from each of those. So I'm David Hadley. If you haven't met me or before, I lead our regulatory impact program. The goals are which to basically ensure positive impacts within the landscape of regulatory and policy compliance. So we do a lot of keeping stakeholders informed about key sustainability policies and regulations that affect them, and also try to ensure that Preferred by Nature itself is providing tools and solutions that are kind of relevant to companies and other stakeholders and ensure positive outcomes. Rosie, or yeah.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see you all. So I'm Rosie Sibley, Senior Sustainability Specialist, and I'm sit in our advisory services part of the organisation, so support companies with the EUDR and compliance with the UKTR as well. I'm based in London in the UK, and I've been with Preferred by Nature since 2019, supporting companies. That's me. Tim?
Yes, thank you, Rosie. Hi, everyone. My name's Timothy Bender. I work with David in our regulatory impact program. I support with all of the things David listed. I've been working with the EUDR over the past year and a half or so quite closely. Through the supporting developing tools and trainings. And I'll be supporting today with any EUDR related questions. Over to you, Carmen.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Carmen Iturriaga. I'm based in Spain. I'm also working together with Rosie in our sustainability advisory department within Preferred by Nature. I've been working within Preferred by Nature for a long time already. I think it's already 9 years. And my background is mostly in forestry and timber sector, with a lot of experience in FSC, PFC certification, and also now in our sustainability advisory department, supporting companies for compliance with, in the past, EUTR and UKTR, but also now I will say 90% of our work is helping with the EUDR regulation. And that's me. And for this webinar, I will be supporting together with Tim in the trying to answer the questions in the chat and also during the Q&A session. So if any of you have some questions during the webinar, you can write them in the chat, and Tim and myself will try to answer them. Thanks.
Great. That's actually thanks for that reminder, or just a prompt for everyone. We have those Q&A sessions, but don't feel you have to wait, or if you hear something during the discussion, then feel free to sort of add a question in. Perhaps Tim and Carmen may answer it, but actually, if it's a good question or if it's a relevant one for everyone, we may actually discuss that as well in the spaces that we have. Let's begin. Let's start with the updates to the or key updates, I should say, to the EUDR guidance and FAQ. I think we have about 10 of these. But first, just a little bit on the updates. So the Commission published the updates on the 15th of April. They released a revised guidance and FAQ documents, and also a draft delegated act. In line with previous statements, if you're following sort of EU Brussels activity, the Commission stated that the EUDR will not be included in any simplification omnibus package. I think, though, that we would not put our hand in the fire and say that won't happen. So there's a little bit of there's quite a lot of unknown around, I think, the future of the regulation and the potential for additional revisions. But at least that was the statement, a statement from the Commission. However, so beyond using this revision of the guidance and the FAQ to clarify technical requirements, it is clear that the Commission has seen this time round that there was a possibility to introduce revisions which eased administrative pressures on companies and kind of followed their simplification agenda. So a lot of the revisions to the questions and the guidance were kind of in that direction, and such that actually the Commission has came up with a statement that said that the revised guidance and FAQ basically had resulted in an estimated 30% reduction in the administrative burden of the regulation. So quickly on each document, like, what are they, if you're a little bit new to this? So firstly, the guidance document was published as a Commission notice last year in November 2024. These Commission notices are often used to clarify how regulations or directives or policies should be implemented. So this latest revision of the guidance really just updated the content of this notice. The original guidance divided into 11 chapters on different topics, and the revisions were more or less within those 11 chapters. There weren't new topics that were introduced or raised. The second document is the FAQ. This is a working document that provides information to national authorities, EU operators, and other stakeholders regarding the implementation of the regulation. So we're now in actually the fourth iteration. That's what was published last year. Version 3 was published in October, sorry, just now. So version 3 was published in October 2024. Version 4 was just last month. So what did we see? Now there are a total of 171 questions answered, up from 129 in the third iteration. There are 41 new responses. 2 questions and answers have been deleted. 60 responses kind of are the same, but there are some changes to the answers, and 68 responses stayed the same. So what that tells us is that a lot of the responses were revised. Some of those revisions are kind of insignificant in nature, they're just clarifications, but others were quite profound. And then finally, they published a draft delegated act. The idea of this was just to really bring some clarity and simplicity to the EUDR by clarifying which products are in scope of the regulation. So the whole of this delegated act just looks directly at only at Annex 1 of the regulation, making what were for the most part just like technical and limited fixes to the list of commodities which are listed as included or relevant relevant products as far as the EUDR is concerned. In fact, this draft act had a period of public consultation until the middle of this month, May. So I think shortly we should see that this will be finalized, and then a final public version will be made available. So our analysis, I think, across all of these 3 documents is that most of the new interpretations of interest are in the FAQ, not the guidance. The changes to the guidance were more just to really align with the FAQ, to align with the delegated act, to change dates as a result of the amending regulation last year. So there isn't that much which is new. There are a couple of things, but this time around, most of the interpretations of interest were in the FAQ. And for the most part, I think within Preferred by Nature, we would feel that these were common sense revisions, a lot of which were to ease the administrative burden or to encourage a circular economy within the European Union and things like this. So let's begin with the revisions, and we'll start with a clarification on the concept of ascertain. And I will just say, for all of these revisions, again, depending on the nature of the organizations listening now, and whether you are solely based in the UK or whether you have entities or subsidiaries in the EU, each company, I think, for each company that's listening here, some of these may be of relevance to you, some of them may not be, but we've included them because they were quite significant. And in previous conversations with UK audiences, a lot of UK companies actually do have operations, facilities, or business entities in Europe. So we're including them in our discussion. So firstly, the concept of ascertain has been revised downward in some way, such that non-SME operators and non-SME traders, these are downstream large operators and traders, are only obliged to collect reference and verification numbers and reference those in their own due diligence statement. Anything beyond that is voluntary. So previously there was this requirement to ascertain due diligence being carried out by upstream suppliers, but it was left a little open as to what that might look like. Now they provided some clarification, at least a legal minimum. That is that the downstream large operator or trader is only required to collect those reference numbers and verification numbers of due diligence statements submitted upstream and verify the validity of those within their own due diligence statement. Here's the thing though, like the verifying of the validity of the reference numbers is done automatically within the information system, within traces. So there's very little in terms of this is a very minor administrative step now in comparison to what it could be. It's important to say though, firstly, obviously we'll share these slides, but it's important to say that the FAQ does raise that operators may wish to go further than these minimums. And while it's optional, they suggest two ways that companies may do that, really based on checking information, either that forms part of the due diligence statement or going beyond to verify additional types of information. So as part of a more expanded, voluntary or non-obligatory ascertaining, companies may verify the country of production or look at geolocation data or quantities. They may pick one or more of these different topics, these different sets of data which are included within the due diligence statements, and wish to check or verify those as well. Additionally, they may go beyond what's actually in the due diligence statement and the information system, and they may look at they may request additional information which could be of any sort or any nature from suppliers. So what to say here? So I guess a question is, why might an operator consider additional steps in their process of ascertaining? Well, the first thing is that they still retain responsibility for non-compliance in all cases. So referencing a due diligence statement or a set of due diligence statements alone may not in some cases be sufficient for this downstream operator, large operator or downstream large trader to really have to truly have confidence that their products are deforestation free and legal. For different reasons, they may want to take additional steps. Perhaps for companies with a close relationship with their suppliers, these are long-standing relationships. Maybe the supply chains are not complex. Doing this minimum may be sufficient. But you could imagine, and this is one area where Preferred by Nature would like to develop, I think, some guidance. You could imagine, for example, that a downstream operator may choose to do additional due diligence, additional ascertaining, for example, for first-time suppliers, to really be sure that their due diligence system is aligned with the EU deforestation regulation. Next topics, composite products with multiple commodities. So due diligence by an operator is only required for the main relevant commodity within a single relevant product. So there was a revision to the guidance, actually, in this case, on examples of composite products. The guidance now aligns with the FAQ, which wasn't the case before April. They said different things. So both documents now state that due diligence is only required for the main relevant commodity within a relevant product. We could take a timber example or wood product, but it's sometimes easier to think of this as if we imagine the product is chocolate. Chocolate may contain cocoa powder, cocoa butter, palm oil, even soy through soy lecithin. If that product is imported or exported effectively under a cocoa commodity code, then it's only the cocoa powder and the cocoa butter which is relevant to the EUDR and for which you need to do due diligence. So I guess in a wood products context, it could be wooden furniture that has leather, may even have some natural rubber of some description. Only the wood would be relevant. Our concern a little bit, I think for us, for preferred by nature, that does clarify things. We are grateful for this. I think we're in a better place in terms of having clarity. We do feel still that the guidance in the FAQ are to some extent going a little bit beyond what the regulation says, something which these documents say that they don't do. So they're both clear that they are non-legally binding, and that they shouldn't add or subtract from the primary legislation, which is the regulation itself. So here there is an interpretation. It's a little bit different to what we see in the text of the regulation, but I think that we expect that all companies will follow this approach, and only the main commodity will be subject to due diligence. So this is an interesting one. The FAQ clarifies now that companies may submit a due diligence statement covering multiple shipments or batches, provided that the due diligence was exercised for all products. But each statement must be submitted before placing products on the market or exporting them, and not cover a period longer than 1 year. Now, it was very interesting because in the press release from the European Commission, they made a statement in which they said companies will be allowed to submit due diligence statements annually instead of for every shipment or batch placed on the EU market. That was very misleading. It created a lot of talk that there was some kind of deregulation, that now you did not need to submit due diligence statements per shipment or for a number of shipments, that you could simply do one due diligence statement per year. Okay, that's not the case. The fact is that this was a clarification of something which already was documented. It was in the first FAQ. It was already possible. It is already possible to submit a due diligence statement for multiple shipments. What's just clarified is that the new guidance simply puts a sensible limit of 1 year on the life of a due diligence statement. And that's really just because operators are required to review their due diligence system at least on an annual basis. So it would be inappropriate, let's say, for a company to submit a due diligence statement that, let's say, was 3 years old, if really they're obliged to evaluate and reevaluate risks and as part of their due diligence system on an annual basis. So this was just a clarification of something that was already there and already existed. So in many respects, nothing's changed here, but we do feel that we needed to clarify this in this call. And to summarize, a due diligence statement covering multiple shipments can be referenced in multiple different customs declarations. And multiple due diligence reference numbers can also be included in one customs declaration. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to raise them in the Q&A. I hope I've helped. It's a slightly tricky subject to talk about. Submitting a due diligence statement on re-import. So here's a real change which may impact some companies. Previously, it was communicated within the FAQ that a re-import of a relevant product into the EU, in other words, a product that had left the EU and was being imported back into the EU, would require due diligence to be conducted again or anew by the operator with a due diligence statement submitted. The argument was that the product had lost its status as a European Union good, so that due diligence then had to be conducted as if it was for the first time. This, I think, maybe thankfully, has been clarified, that now when a product was previously exported and is re-imported, the re-importer is considered a downstream operator. In other words, the obligations of the re-importer now depend on whether they're an SME or a non-SME. SME re-importers, small, medium enterprises, only need to provide reference numbers and no due diligence is required. Non-SME large re-importers must submit a new due diligence statement, but can reference previously submitted due diligence statements. So to summarize, the re-importer, as per this image, has the must follow the legal requirements of a downstream operator. This, I think, is a welcome change as far as preferred by nature is concerned. So here's an interesting one, and actually, so two new FAQs, 29.1 and 29.2, seek to provide clarification on some aspects of how EUDR legal production requirements are interpreted. They're as follows. Firstly, the supply chain is now relevant, confirming some references in the original guidance document published last year. The FAQ clarifies that legislation is relevant legislation is applicable for the area of production. We know that already. However, in the case of trade and customs laws, it states that such laws can also be relevant if they concern the relevant sectors of agricultural and timber production. In other words, if you have a specific agricultural or forest-related document that needs to be supplied at customs or forms part of trade or transport down the supply chain, that would be relevant. Effectively, what the interpretation of the regulation in these FAQ is achieving is that it's confirming that the interpretation of the European Commission is to consider trade and customs in a similar light as the EU timber regulation. Okay, now this is important because it's our experience, I think, or perception that most companies, most operators, or organizations preparing for the EUDR, when they think of legal production or legally compliant production or harvesting, they're not thinking of the supply chain. They're really thinking of just the plots of land and the area of production. To be clear, the trade and customs laws are only relevant in the country of production. So that in this sort of example we give here, that would be to the point of export from China, for example. So I will maybe speed up a little bit. I think I've got maybe two or three, I'm not quite sure. Packaging and pallets. There's a sort of a group of requirements, or I should say clarifications, that address packaging and pallets. What do we know so far about packaging? So where packaging, for example, pallets themselves, are placed or made available on the EU market for the first time as a product in their own right, rather than as packaging of another product, they are covered by the EU and normal due diligence requirements apply. We also know that once the packaging becomes packaging of a product, and it's supporting, protecting, or carrying that product, then it's not covered by the scope of the regulation. So what's new is that a number of clarifications have been made. Selling or renting used packaging to other companies, like second-hand pallets, is now not subject to the EU deforestation regulation. Empty used packaging already used for the first time to support, protect, or carry another product, for instance, perhaps within a traded or within a closed loop exchange system, is also out of scope. However, in these cases, if that packaging or that packing is repaired, for example, pallets are repaired where they're broken with new wood, then those new materials would be subject to due diligence, and a due diligence statement would need to be submitted for that. This is perhaps a minor point, but actually I think it impacts probably all companies that have some kind of relationship to some extent with the EUDR. Small samples for testing or to solicit orders are now not covered by the EUDR. I think we could put some examples here. None of them is from the wood sector, the timber sector, but we can imagine what those might be. So what the proposed delegated act does is it clarifies that product samples that are used for examination, analysis, testing are in many cases of negligible value. They're used by companies to seek or solicit orders. They're subjected to tests, analyses, examination, etc. And often they're destroyed as part of the process of testing. Their relevance in terms of impact on impact on deforestation, impact in relation to the objectives of the EUDR is pretty minor. So to save everyone a lot of hassle for what is a very minor component or element of timber trade, they've removed them from the scope of the EUDR. Again, I think we think that makes sense. Very quickly, renting out of relevant products, renting without ownership transfer is generally now outside of the EUDR unless the product is imported into or exported from the EU. So let's look at two examples. On the one on the left, a company buys wooden furniture with due diligence having been completed. It rents that furniture out, let's say within the EU, without transferring ownership to company B in this case. That whole renting process is not subject to any EUDR obligations. On the right-hand side, however, to illustrate that other point, any product that's released for circulation, in other words, it's imported into the EU or it's placed under the customs procedure export, even if it were rented out, is considered being placed on the market and therefore it's subject to the EUDR. My final slide is not really a technical clarification, but I think this may be of relevance or perhaps importance for different companies for very different reasons, possibly. Norway, Liechtenstein, Iceland, and Switzerland are all contracting parties of the EU Free Trade Association, that's the EFTA. As such, they're not in the customs territory of the EU, and therefore the regulation considers these 4 countries as third parties. Okay, so they're considered to be, as per the UK, I guess, and other countries just outside the European Union. In the case of Liechtenstein, Iceland, and Norway, they do form part of a grouping called the European Economic Area. So in actual fact, it is possible that those 3 countries, if they choose to, could adopt the EUDR and implement that within national legislation. In that case, the EUDR would become applicable to those 3 countries. As far as we are aware, within Preferred by Nature, or at least the last time we checked, which is maybe just a couple of weeks ago, none of those countries had sort of any concrete plans, at least communicated as such, to do that. And if they do, it would be a process of months and years, not weeks. So for now, I think we can consider all 4 countries third countries, and that will remain the case for a while. Switzerland, because it's not part of the EEA, will always be a third country. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. That's a very comprehensive review of all the key updates, and we can see there have been many questions going through, coming in the chat box. And thanks very much, Tim and Carmen, for your help answering and reviewing those questions. Now is a break Q&A. We were wondering whether if anyone have any questions, if you could raise your hand and we will unmute you, or feel free to do that yourself, and then you can ask directly to David and Rosie.
Right, it's John from Lambsons. Can you hear me?
Hello.
I think there's two questions go around. Well, same question go around in the chat box about this timing of products produced and to be placed on the market. So the question from stock produced from June 23 up to December 25. If that stock hasn't got any geolocation data on it, that can't be simply placed on the European market. That seems to be quite a potential problem for people if a lot of the countries of origin haven't already sorted out their geolocation information and can't then backdate it.
Thank you, John.
Any further thoughts if that's going to change at all?
David? You are on mute, David. Sorry.
Yes, good question. Tim, jump in here. Yes, firstly, change, not that I'm aware of. That's actually a good, a good point. I'm pretty sure that within 2025, we'll see further updates of the guidance and the FAQ. That said, yes, it is the case that there are different scenarios. So whether a product was harvested prior to June 2023 or not, but if you were to have wood products, let's say harvested within the UK as of today, but placed on the market in January of 2026, then there would be a requirement for geolocation data. Tim.
I'm just sharing my screen just to see. I don't know if it would
Yes.
help, like a table where it says
Right.
specifically, or try to clarify the timelines when EUDR will be still applicable. So EUDR is not applicable. I don't know if you can see it well, but it's like
Yes.
as it is. So if the let's say if the product has been produced with wood that has been, I mean, if the product is been manufactured with wood that has been produced before 29 of June 2023, and this product, I mean, for this product, EUDR is not applicable till 31st of December 2028. So there is still quite a lot of time. The same if this product, the same product is manufactured with wood that has been produced between 29th of June 2023 and 30 December of 25. This product, I mean, still doesn't require the EUDR obligation, like let's say to have geolocation data, if this product is placed into the European market before the date into this December, 30 December 2025. So in this case, this product still doesn't have obligations to comply with EUDR. It still can comply only with EUDR. But if the same product is placed into the market after that date, then it needs to comply with EUDR. And here it is when you may have a problem, because you have products in your stock that have been produced with timber or wood that has been produced in long time ago, and then you don't have the geolocation data, etc. So here is when you may have more problems in this scenario. So for products being manufactured between using wood that has been produced in this period, and the product is introduced into the market starting in 1st of January 26, for example. Yeah.
That's great. We'll include that in the slides. That's very helpful. Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen. Natalia, you have your hand raised.
I have a
Natalia,
question,
please.
yes, because I was
Yes.
one of the participants that asked that question. In Ireland, we have our skin plant, and they are a SME operator, downstream operator, and we have a discussion recently about that topic because there will be a huge finance loss for skin plant in the warehouse. I was thinking, is it possible for SMA operator to reach to our main suppliers, upstream suppliers, and ask for data for due diligence? Can we perform due diligence on the warehouse stock, or do we need to wait for the due diligence reference number? Because when we have the cut-off date, and for example, we'll have still some skins in a warehouse, and okay, what we are doing now? Should we scrap them, wait for the other guidance, or can we perform our due diligence risk assessment on that stock in warehouse, asking operators for additional data, additional documents? That I'm asking if we can do that or not.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know if this was in the chat. I'm not exactly sure the supply chain. I'd say if there's a special case there and you want to write to us, we'd be happy to answer that. But if I understood, if the question is whatever the specifics of the supply chain, if the question is that you have wood in the warehouse or wood products, and those products may be placed on the EU market post, in 2026, then, or there's a potential for that to happen, I would certainly not wait for guidance or revised guidance. I would say that it seems to me that it would make sense to begin to seek to understand the provenance and the origin of the material and not delay that process.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's why I wanted to ask, because that was unclear a little bit what we can do or we can't do. So in our supply chain is very easy and very straightforward, because our upstream suppliers are both Irish suppliers, so low risk. And we are just, we work with them for years, so we exactly know what the timber is coming from. So we don't have any risk in our supply chain, but we need to have that certainty that we have everything in place to be able to place our product on the market or export it from the European Union. So in that situation, can I ask you another question, guys, here? So in that situation, when we will perform all the checks on the timber product, so as a SME, we will need to do our due diligence statement and upload it to the information system. Is that correct? When we want, for example, export skins from Ireland?
Right. So as let's say an SME enterprise in Ireland, if you are exporting products from Ireland outside of the EU, then the answer to that question, you would have the obligations of an exporter in that scenario.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I wanted to know. I just wanted that confirmation in my way of thinking is correct. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, David. Maybe just one more, and then we really have to move on. Catherine?
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Sorry, just a couple of points. The first one, just back on that point again, just so I completely understand it. And sorry if we've already explained it and I'm not getting it. But let's say a product it's come out of the EU to the UK, say now, and then it's going back into the EU. In that situation, is this EUDR, or because it was already placed on the EU market before 2025, but it's come out of the EU and it's going back in again? I have a vague memory of hearing something about it having some sort of special due diligence reference number or something. Is that correct, or have I imagined that?
Yeah, so
it's weird.
I'll answer for one thing, and then maybe my colleagues can jump in if they feel the second. So let's assume and export and re-import into the EU completely, where everything happens completely within 2026, then you would be correct to say a product is exported from the EU.
Yeah.
When it's re-imported into the EU, rather than being considered as if it were a product imported for the first time, the operator is actually like a downstream operator. They would be able to reference due diligence statement numbers, previous due diligence statement numbers.
Yeah. No, yeah, I get that. It was more the bit, you know, that kind of transition period.
Yes.
It's when it's been exported after 2020, June 2023, but before
yes.
the end of this year. Should we be collecting? I'm just trying to work out what we need to do with all the stock that's sitting there now that's come from the EU.
Right.
They haven't given any geolocations, and then it's going back into the EU again. Are we supposed to be collecting them or not?
Yeah. I'm trying to answer this in the chat. I don't
sorry.
have fully clarity on this, as David said, but I think, I mean, if a product has been placed into the European market before 30 December 2025, then this product is under EUDR. I mean, EUDR does not apply to that product. But I'm not sure what is going to be the requirement for exporting this product after that date. You know, in January, for example, January 2026. What I guess is for exporting this product, the product will need to be covered under the due diligence statement for exporting, right? This is what I guess this will happen, but I'm not sure. So then is the company exporting this product from the European Union will need to submit a specific information to the system for exporting that product. But I guess, I mean, this product does not have obligations to provide geolocation data because this product is not mandatory. I mean, it's under UTR, not UDR. You know,
Exactly. So it's just a bit confusing about what we'd have to do if we're going to put it back in the EU, because it seems that
but I mean, for putting it back into the EU, for sure you will need to reference to the due diligence statement reference number for exporting.
Yeah, but given that there aren't any.
But there are, if they supplied it to, let's say they supplied it to us today, today, and then we're putting it back in on the 2nd of January, we don't have a due diligence reference number. But
I think
it was put on the market in the EU before. So it's just a bit, I just want to make sure that we're doing the right things. There's going to be lots of that scenario. I don't know if anyone else
just to jump in here quickly, you could now already submit a due diligence statement if you wanted to. Right, the information system is already
I guess the supplier could.
You don't have
but
to,
if
right?
they
but
didn't,
they didn't, but just saying it would be possible to now already have a due diligence statement submitted and then later on refer to that.
But we're kind of relying on the supplier in the EU so we're kind of I'm just wondering if there was a kind of, because it's already in the EU, essentially it was placed on the EU market before, but it'd be really good to
I don't know if the product is exported now and then is going to be re-imported after 30 December 2025. I don't know. Maybe this is considered as a new product, right?
It's the first time we've been asked that. It's the first time I've been asked that question.
Sorry.
I don't think it's clear answer from you.
Yeah, maybe let's discuss that internally. Like we'll discuss it within Preferred by Nature, and through Xiao and Joe, we can pass back our best answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we have to move on, but I do also vaguely remember there's clarification on that question somewhere in the FAQ. But Catherine, thank you. We will take this question back as well.
Thanks.
There are questions of transition. There are, I should say, clarifications around the transition period. It's just not clear. If there's more. Let me just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen again.
Thank you, David.
Right. Let's do that again.
Not yet.
It's coming just a second. So
it's okay. In the meantime, everybody, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you.
that again.
Let me know.
Now it's going to work. Okay. Yeah. I think you can see, you'll see that shortly now. Is that right? Can you see that?
Yes, all good, David.
Great. Okay.
Well done.
Great. I'll try to be a little faster now. We're sort of, running short. So country benchmarks. I really just wanted to talk about country benchmarks. Obviously, last week, the 22nd, the Commission released its long-awaited first list of country benchmarks as an implementing act. This is a pretty big milestone in the 2025 calendar, in which a whole bunch of countries, 194 in total, were ranked as either high, standard, or low risk. So they also released a communication, a staff working document, which talked a little bit about the methodology. The objectives of these benchmarks have always been to provide clarity for operators regarding the simplified due diligence procedure, which is Article 13, which provides a sort of a streamlined approach to conducting due diligence, so that at least that's the intention. And it's for competent authorities as well, to allow them to plan their annual compliance checks and for some other purposes. How are countries assessed? So you may or may not be aware, there's a sort of an outline of the methodology has been published and available for a little while. It's not, the detail is not super clear. There's some scoring involved, and it's not always clear how countries have scored and under what circumstances and which countries have been scored. But it's pretty straightforward for the quantitative criteria. So the Commission looks at historical rates of deforestation, rates of expansion of agricultural commodities, EUDR commodities, as well as production trends, using for the most part FAO Global Forest Resources Assessment data. And the data they used was the latest data available, which was from 2020. Then for countries which were kind of close to the low standard threshold and possibly close to the high threshold, they looked at some other qualitative data as well that relates to the covering of emissions and removals from agriculture, forestry, and land use in NDCs that form part of the Paris Agreement, agreements and other instruments with the EU or EU member states, national and subnational laws that combat deforestation, things like this. So what were the results? I don't know if you've been following this, but of the 140 countries, I should say, were categorized as low risk. 50 countries concluded as standard risk, and only 4 countries as high risk. So the high risk countries were Belarus, Myanmar, Korea, North Korea, and Russia. Imports from these countries, if not already prohibited, will undergo the most stringent checks by competent authorities. Standard risk countries, major forested nations such as Brazil and Indonesia, despite their historically high deforestation rates, are classified as standard risk. So these will face this moderate scrutiny by competent authorities. And then low-risk countries, United States, Canada, China, all EU member states, the UK obviously, Ukraine, Thailand, for rubber, that's particularly interesting, were concluded as low risk. What are our first reactions here? So, I mean, I think if you look at some of the civil society concerns raised as well, I mean, I think we could all find from the list some like surprising conclusions. You know, hey, look at that country that was categorized as low risk. The Solomon Islands, for example, was low risk. Many first reactions imply that maybe there was some kind of that the methodology was imperfect, or there was too much simplification, or perhaps even pressure, or political motivations for setting the different categories. But I think if you look at the methodology, it's fairly straightforward. It's not using satellite imagery or new technologies. It's really just looking at basic FAO data. That FAO data was already 5 years old. In the staff working document, the commissioner also recognized that there was missing information, missing data that they would normally include in the methodology, such as data on forest degradation risk, for example, that wasn't incorporated into or integrated into the methodology because they didn't have good data sets. So I think we can take from that future iterations, future versions of the benchmark will be improved over time. There was a little bit of lack of transparency, I think it's fair to say, around the qualitative data and how that was applied. But there we have it. The first review of and possible revision of the country benchmarks will take place as early as next year. That's because later this year, 2025, FAO data becomes available. So they'll have a new data set to evaluate country risks. So that's quite a quick turnaround. I would have thought maybe the revisions would be less frequent. What are just some general implications, I think, for UK companies? If you're a UK company supplying into Europe, perhaps GB grown products or products that you've sourced yourself from other low-risk countries, operators will be able to benefit from simplified due diligence. This may alleviate their work to some extent, and perhaps your work as well, to demonstrate that your products align with the EUDR and meet your buyers' needs. For UK companies with EU-based entities, basically acting as operators, well, you'll be able to benefit from simplified due diligence also. Caution though, sourcing low risk from low risk countries doesn't mean that there's nothing to do. It's not as simplified as you might think. And I have a few slides there. In fact, we'll look at those now. So, due diligence obligations, Articles 9, 10, and 11 are relevant for collecting information, assessing risk, and risk mitigation within the text of the EU deforestation regulation. What the simplified due diligence requirements speak to is that companies that are sourcing from operators sourcing from low-risk countries are liberated from having to conduct risk assessments as per Article 10 and risk mitigation activities as per Article 11 of the EU deforestation regulation. So does that mean then that all due diligence obligations are lifted? No, not quite. While that's the case, Article 13 on simplified due diligence says nothing about Article 9, which is the article on collecting information. Okay, so there are a list of requirements that still are relevant to operators sourcing from low-risk countries. These are, for example, collecting all information under the Article 9, and we'll look at each of these in turn, assessing the risk of mixing and circumvention, and responding to substantiated concerns and other information that the operator may become aware of that conflicts with that low risk conclusion. So let's look at the first one. As I think we all know, even for these low risk countries, operators are still required to obtain geolocation data and information on the date and time range of production. They need to collect all of that other sort of basic information about their products, quantities, countries of production, the contact details of suppliers, things like this. They're also, if you look at Article 9, Paragraph 1, they're also, remember that simplified due diligence says nothing about Article 9, and part of Article 9 is collecting adequately conclusive and verifiable information that either relates to deforestation or relates to ensuring legally compliant production. So this is a little bit of a gray area because it's kind of interesting that the regulation is saying, okay, now you don't need to do risk assessments or mitigation in line with Articles 10 and 11. But as part of Article 9, which they say nothing about, which the regulation says nothing about, you still need to comply with that article. That actually requires that the operator collects adequately inclusive and verifiable information that speaks to the products being deforestation free and having been produced in line with the laws of the country of production. It's possible, I think here is a good example of where we may see in future guidance or FAQ a clarification of this. In other words, we may see from the Commission some kind of clarification that Articles 9, 1G, and H, this requirement for conclusive and verifiable information is, operators sourcing from low-risk countries don't need to do that. Let's see. For now, that's not the case. I think it's fair to say that most operators would say, well, the conclusive and verifiable information that my product is deforestation free is actually the country benchmark itself. So that's my information. And I think there's some logic in that. It will be, I think, still necessary for operators to ensure that they do have information which relates to which demonstrates legally compliant production. And that's really partly because the country benchmarks only liberate if you think of Article 3, it's the prohibition. 3A is that products must be deforestation free, and Article 29, which is the country benchmarking requirements, only speaks to products which are low risk being deforestation free. It doesn't speak to them being legally compliant. So there's still some burden on companies to ensure that they have information which speaks to the product being legally compliant. Operators must also assess the risk of mixing and circumvention. Circumvention being obviously that products from standard or high-risk countries may be deliberately traded, processed through a low-risk country to appear that they're actually coming from that low-risk country. If you look at the map of low and standard risk countries, there are quite a few cases of these two countries being right beside each other. So I think that highlights that there are risks of circumvention for products. We certainly see that with Russia, for example. There's a lot of circumvention of Russian wood. So that's something that I think that the regulation has recognized. And what it says is that if you detect risk of mixing or risk of circumvention, then you should do, in those cases, full due diligence. And thirdly, the simplified due diligence requirements still also say that where the operator obtains or is made aware of, so they don't need to be necessarily this may be something that could come from from other organizations. They're made aware of any information that would put into into doubt or conflict with that low risk conclusion, then in those cases they should conduct due diligence as well, full due diligence, in lines with Article 9, 10, and 11. A little bit of guidance from us, and I think this may be my last slide or second to last. So just to be kind of clear again, simplified due diligence is optional. It's an opportunity for companies to streamline some of their activities, but it's not an obligation that you have to implement simplified due diligence. There may be many cases where a company may decide that they don't want to go that route and implement simplified due diligence. They prefer to maintain, to be more active and to be assessing risks and mitigating those. There could be many reasons why that's the case. We could talk about those, but just to clarify that it's an optional thing. Country classifications may change. Well, we know that some of them could change next year. So companies, I think, should prepare accordingly. If you're considering that there may be a change in a country that is currently low risk and maybe raised to standard risk, then that's something that an operator would want to prepare in advance for, if possible. And then sourcing from high risk countries. Clearly, as I mentioned, so many imports are from these countries are already banned, but perhaps not all products. So just be aware that compliance burdens will be extremely high for these products. It's 9% of the total volume of imports into EU countries. So we're likely to see a lot of activity and inspections around high-risk products from high-risk countries. And that's the last slide there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. That was very, very helpful. Okay, I think we got a few more minutes for any further Q&A. If anyone want to unmute yourself, please raise your hand. Are there any questions in the chat that you would like to ask directly to David? Oh, Natalia. Hello, Natalia.
Hello again. Sorry to bother you again. So in terms of low-risk countries and simplified risk assessment, what's the role of FSC and PFC certification? Because we only supply from suppliers that are certified. So can we use that PFC or FSC certification to evaluate our risk?
Yeah, as verifiable and conclusive evidence, I think that credible certification schemes would count as credible and as how did I say verifiable evidence, conclusive and verifiable evidence for credible schemes. I mean, there's a lot of schemes out there. It'll be interesting to see if FSC and PFC themselves actually communicate anything in relation to the country benchmarks. But yes, if you're sourcing or certified, or you're placing or exporting onto the EU market certified products, then for sure, both of those certification schemes are going to give you as an operator some level of assurance that those products are aligned with the EU deforestation regulation. Obviously, it's the responsibility. The due diligence obligations are always at the level of the company. So it's part of your due diligence is evaluating the performance and the systems of those schemes and making a judgment as to whether you're comfortable with their alignment with the regulation or not. But yeah, I think broadly we can say that the presence of both of those schemes is positive for supporting compliance with the EU deforestation regulation.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Hello, Joe.
Hi, yeah, just a question for David, Rosie and the team, but just thinking as well, I've noticed throughout this Indonesia being down as a standard risk country to bring the whole flag T debate back in. But my understanding would be that simplified due diligence wouldn't be applicable to that scenario. They would have to carry out full due diligence on the on an import from Indonesia. Would Flag T licensing then help with the evidence of legality specifically on that? Are they still adopting that framework there, or will it be a completely, will that be kind of scrapped for EUDR purposes?
I can maybe just quickly answer that. Yes, the FLEGT license will cover all of the legality requirements.
Yeah.
So if it's, yeah, fully covered.
Yeah, I thought that might be the case, but I just wanted to get clarification on my interpretation, really.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the deforestation requirement as the standard risk country remains. So I'm not raising my hand. I made a mistake there.
It's okay, you just applauding, David. Tim's
I was
answer.
looking to like agree with Tim's statement, but now I seem to have a permanent.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you, everybody. Anyone else? Heather, do you want to unmute and ask the question directly? I saw you just text a question in the chat.
Hi, yeah, it wasn't a question. It was just to answer the previous question about certification. It was just to confirm there is stuff on the website as well. I'm actually really new to FSC, but I'm working on EUDR, which is why I'm here. But for the previous question on certification, so basically FSC and other certification companies align with EUDR. However, they don't exempt people who take on the certification from their EUDR obligations. I think that was said by David anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to put a little post in there for you.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, perfectly described, Heather. You know, just one interesting observation, and we're following up with some competent authorities in the EU about this. You know, it is the case that, you know, there's no green lane for certified products, but it's highly likely that, well, it's possible, I don't know to what extent possible, that competent authorities, as they plan their sort of inspection calendars, or they develop their inspection plans, that they may take a risk-based approach in some ways. And it's possible that any competent authority may say, well, look, you know, clearly you can't give a green lane to anything, but they may, for example, look at certification and say, well, okay, they're certified suppliers or supplies. We're going to, you know, we're going to lower our inspection of those types of organizations. So it's not a loophole, but in a way, it's a way that actually certification may have an impact. Even though, yes, for sure, there's no green lane, and it doesn't remove operators of any responsibility.
Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, very good.
It was just really a thought more than anything else about certification schemes. So if your product is, let's say, FSC certified, and you have to apply the FSC control wood risk assessment methodology if you're mixing products like West Fraser does, then if a country is low risk under EUDR, but the FSC control wood risk assessment identifies areas of specified risk, you need to risk assess those out in order to bring that product to market as a certified product. So therefore, the FSC control wood risk assessment would be your foundation for your assessment. So for example, there is some talk at the moment about a change to the UK's current FSC control wood risk rating from low. And if that does happen, you're going to have a low risk country under EUDR, but it could have specified risks for certain aspects of harvesting, for example. So you could use your control wood risk assessments as your guides. World Wildlife Fund, of course, and Preferred by Nature also have their own country risk ratings, but you could use that methodology as part of your due diligence.
Thank you, Julie, for that clarification. I'm afraid I think we really have to move on, as we only have 14 minutes left. I think next, if we could welcome Rosie to tell us a bit more about Preferred by Nature's support and what toolkit we could, Preferred by Nature offers when it comes to EUDR. Thank you, Rosie.
Thanks, Shao. And you can hear me okay and see my screen?
Yes, all good.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'll just briefly go through in terms of how Preferred by Nature can support companies with the requirements of the EUDR. So I'm going to talk through kind of 5 different solutions that we have to support different organizations. So I'll just talk through the EUDR toolkit and the sourcing hub and the scoping tool. And they're all solutions or tools that are online and are free to use. And then I'll also just touch on Preferred by Nature certification and then advisory services as well. Okay. So I'll just start with the EUDR, the due diligence toolkit. So what is the Preferred by Nature due diligence toolkit? So the idea is that it helps organisations such as yourselves to implement due diligence systems, and it can be used for both forestry, so timber, but then also other agricultural commodities as well, and both within the EU and outside of the EU. And it's aligned to our Preferred by Nature sustainability framework, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then also the due diligence requirements of the EUDR. Okay, so the toolkit is a set of different tools to help put into practice your responsible sourcing activities as a business. So there's 24 different tools in total, and it's a very comprehensive toolkit. And so of those 24 different tools, there are templates, guides, and procedures. So in terms of the guides, these are documents that outline best practice on, say, for example, responsible sourcing policies, how to map supply chains, etc. And then as well as the guides, there are then templates. So these are tools that you can then apply to your operations in your business to apply those templates. And on the whole, these are they're relatively simple in the fact that they're either Word documents or Excel based. And in reality, you might have far more data than an Excel spreadsheet. But what you can do is use that Excel spreadsheet to then, if you're working with an IT system, see whether the IT system has the requirements that are listed in the template and do a comparison there. And obviously, if you've got much simpler supply chains, then you could use those templates as they are as well. And then the procedures are step-by-step instructions for developing your systems as well. So the toolkit is split into 5 different areas. So and I'll go through each of these areas. So there's the system setup, information and supply chains, assessing risk, and then responding to risks and mitigating risk, and then finally reporting and transparency. So step 1 is the system setup. And then as part of this, you've got the due diligence system guide and the responsible sourcing policy guide, and then the template for that responsible sourcing guide as well. And then a due diligence procedure template as well. So the core of your due diligence system, how does it work? There's a template for developing that procedure. Then step 2 is information and supply chains. So there's guidance in terms of supply chain mapping, and then different templates within that. So there's a supplier questionnaire, and that's about onboarding suppliers and ensuring that suppliers meet the EUDR requirements before you work with that supplier. There's a supplier letter template, so that's about informing suppliers of the EUDR and your requirements, and then also a consent form template so that the suppliers are therefore required to provide the relevant information to you. And then there's a template for collecting the information and then managing that information as well. Then step 3 is the risk assessment. So there's a guide to how to do risk assessments and then a template. And that's at the supply chain level. So both a supply chain risk assessment guide and template. And then there's additionally a national risk assessment procedure and template. So that's if there's a country that you're sourcing from and there isn't a FSC risk assessment for it, or there isn't a Preferred by Nature assessment, then there is a procedure of how to do that national risk assessment to support yourselves as an organisation. So step 4, then responding to risks and mitigating risk. So as part of this, there's an assurance evaluation procedure. So this is about being able to evaluate certification schemes. So for example, evaluating FSC to the EUDR. And most of that information is public, but say you're working with an assurance system that hasn't yet had a benchmark against EUDR, then it may be relevant to follow that procedure and to use the template there. And then there's also a supplier verification guide. So if you want to verify your supplier's due diligence system, that you're confident that it meets the requirements of EUDR, then there's a guide to do that and then a template for that procedure as well. And then step 5 is reporting and transparency. So there's a procedure there for reporting on your due diligence system and then a product statement as well. Okay. So in terms of accessing the toolkit, so it's on the Preferred by Nature website and it's free to download. You do have to enter in your name and email address, and I think it's towards the bottom of the web page. I know it's caught a few people out, but if you fill in that information, then you're able to download the zip file and you'll be able to download all of the 24 different tools. And we'll share the slides afterwards with the link to the toolkit on it as well. Okay, so then just in terms of some of the other tools, so I'm sure lots of you are familiar with the Sourcing Hub and have used it in the past, but just a reminder that it's a database of risk data, both for timber and it has other agricultural commodities on it as well. And this covers legality risk in country and also has guidance in terms of mitigating identified risks in country as well. And that's available on the website at the link there also. And that's particularly useful when doing risk assessments and identifying legality risk at the country level. And then the EUDR scoping tool. So this is a self-assessment tool to help you understand what your role is and your obligations in terms of the EUDR. And it's a quick and easy tool to use, and it doesn't take more than 5 minutes to fill out, and you get immediate answers to it. And what it takes into account is looks at what your position in the supply chain is, so whether you're an importer or an exporter, etc., the size of your company, so if you're an SME or non-SME, and then from that it gives you results in terms of what your obligations are. And just to say that this has been updated to the latest FAQ, so it is up to date with those as well. Okay, so just to touch on Preferred by Nature certification. So Preferred by Nature certification, so this is based on the framework here, or the sustainability frameworks I've mentioned. And it has, this is the framework that then sits behind the certification. So there's 4 different principles that make up the framework. So the first one being business management, or management and business practices. So that's about including things like payment of taxes and avoiding corruption. Then the second principle is people's well-being and human rights. The third principle is ensuring that nature and the environment is protected. And then the final principle is on climate and reducing and mitigating climate impacts. So there's 4 principles, and then within those are 25 criteria and then 157 indicators. And then this really provides the backbone to the certification scheme. So then there's 2 different scopes. So there's the full sustainability scope, which includes that 157 indicators. And then there's a subset, which is the regulatory scope. And this is 40 indicators, and it's been designed to meet the requirements of due diligence regulations, such as the EUDR. So then behind the certification is a set of normative documents that have been developed. So the first one is the sustainability framework, as I've mentioned, and then there's the system requirements. So these are used to ensure consistent implementation of the certification program and to make it applicable to certified organisations. Then there's the due diligence system requirements. So this would be particularly relevant for companies that need to comply with due diligence regulation. Then there's the chain of custody and traceability standard, so how to evaluate claims that are made through the supply chain, and the seal use policy. So if you become certified to the standard, then how to use that seal. And then in addition, there are the EUDR aligned indicators. So that document is the set of just EUDR indicators, and that sits in a separate document as well. So that's briefly preferred by nature certification, and if you're interested in that, then feel free to contact us and we can explain more and discuss that in more detail as well. Okay, and then so finally, in terms of preferred by nature advisory services, so this is very much tailored services which are bespoke to your organisation, and this is relevant both for complying with the EUDR but also in terms of the UKTR. And there's lots of examples of working. We work with lots of different companies, both the EUDR and the UKTR. So in terms of the different services, so the first service is in terms of gap analysis. So understanding how your system works at the moment in terms of due diligence and whether there are gaps with aligning it to regulation, so EUDR or UKTR. Then system development, so we support companies in terms of setting up procedures, developing policies, and the implementation of the system. And then we can support in terms of supply chain risk assessment, so looking at supply chains and identifying whether or not there's risks there. And then training, so this could be internal training to your staff and training your teams. Or it could be external training to your suppliers, and we can do that in person or online, as well as use our colleagues around the world to do the training in different languages. So if you've got suppliers that are based in China, then we can do the training in Chinese, or if it's in another country, in the local language there. And then independent on-site verification, so working with your suppliers to do on-site audits and to ensure their systems are aligned. And then finally, the last piece there is ongoing advisory. So if there are specific technical questions, we can work with you on an ongoing basis in terms of supporting you with those technical questions and being able to answer those specifically where they're unique to your organisation as well. Okay, I'm just looking at time. I feel I should probably wrap up there. But yeah, this just goes through the different phases and in terms of what our recommended approach would be. But yeah, if you're interested in, the first three tools that I've gone through, you can go on the website and use those. And then if you're interested in preferred by nature certification or advisory services, then you can reach out to us. Be happy to discuss those.